The forest had been quiet for years, not peaceful, never that, not in Groton State Forest, east of Barre, Vermont. The silence that hung in the trees here was different. It was the kind of silence that held breath, the kind that hovered not from peace but from something waiting just beneath the hill. And that silence had a name now. It had for 20 years, Redfern Ridge. In the early morning of October 17, 2025, a team of contractors working under a new state environmental restoration program arrived in Groton with standard orders: survey the soil, clear debris, and assess the safety of old forest trails that had been closed since 2005. One of them, a man named Josh Bentley, lit a cigarette with his back against the trees, the mist curling low against his boots. The others were already setting up equipment near a long-forgotten trail marker half swallowed by bark. And then it started. The clang of a shovel, a hollow thud. Not dirt, not stone. Something artificial. "Hey," Josh called out, "that's not a root." They all turned. 5 men in neon vests, standing at the edge of the woods, staring at a patch of ground that suddenly felt wrong. Beneath the disturbed soil, less than a foot under, was something hard, flat, and impossibly large. As they cleared more, fingers trembling, the full shape began to reveal itself. It was a tent, not a tarp, not a piece of gear. An entire tent, buried in a man-made pit, encased in old cracked concrete, intact. The discovery was reported by noon. By nightfall, the site was sealed off by police. And by the following morning, every resident of Barre, Vermont, who had once been a child in the year 2005, felt something shift, something awaken. Because even before the news confirmed it, they all knew what it meant. It was them. It was the missing scouts. The rain fell gently that night. Not a storm, not a downpour, just the slow, steady tapping of misty droplets on leaf and soil, like fingers drumming on wood. Inside the perimeter, Detective Riley Mathers stood over the site, flashlight beam bouncing off the slick canvas of the unearthed tent. She wasn't from Barre. She didn't grow up hearing the stories, but she felt it. That dread in the roots of her teeth. She stepped forward and unzipped the tent flap. What she saw made her take 3 steps back. Everything was untouched. 6 sleeping bags, backpacks, neatly arranged, a lantern tipped on its side, a deck of cards, a Boy Scout's compass, half-filled water bottles, labels faded, and there, at the center of it all, folded with almost painful precision, a red and yellow neckerchief, clean, pressed. Personalized with black stitching, Caleb, Troop 43. The name hit hard enough that one of the younger officers behind her, who had grown up in Barre, had to turn away and cover his mouth. Because that name wasn't just a name, it was one of the 7. The 7 boys who went into Groton Forest 20 years ago and never came back. The ones who were last seen on the evening of October 14, 2005. The ones whose bodies were never recovered until now. Maybe. Across town, Olivia Granger dropped her coffee mug. It shattered across the hardwood floor of her studio apartment on East Hill Street, the hot liquid seeping through old morning papers. She didn't even flinch. Her eyes were locked on the small screen of her television, where a local anchor spoke the words she thought. An underground structure resembling a tent, sealed in concrete, discovered this morning in Groton Forest, believed to be connected to the long unsolved 2005 disappearance of local scout group Troop 43. Her hand trembled as she reached for the TV remote. She didn't change the channel. She turned up the volume. The site has been secured by Vermont State Police. No remains have been confirmed. Forensic teams are en route. She barely heard the rest. The tent. After all these years. After all the articles she had written, the interviews, the public records requests, the ignored calls, the silences, the sealed files, the gaslighting, the accusations, the whispers about her father, the way the town turned from her like she was diseased. And now, the tent. It existed. Back in the forest, light was fading quickly. The crime scene was lit by 3 large floodlights, buzzing softly, attracting moths like ghosts flickering through the fog. Detective Mathers moved closer again. One by one she pointed out the objects inside to the photographer and evidence techs. "There's no decomposition," one of them whispered. "That's not possible," the other replied. "It's been 2 decades, even if they'd been preserved. The elements..." But there's no mold, no decay, no smell. The flap was zipped tight. The tent had been buried airtight. Someone had sealed them in. The local historical society building had been closed for years. But that night, a light came on inside. A woman with gray hair and sharp eyes unlocked an old key. She pulled out a manila envelope, untouched since 2006. She laid the photos out across the table. 7 boys, smiling, laughing, backpacks slung over shoulders, standing in a row in front of the Redfern Ridge trailhead, one of them holding a wooden staff with their troop number carved in block letters, 43. The 8th child wasn't there. She had stayed home with a fever, Olivia Granger. The only one who survived because she didn't go. And now, 20 years later, she was the only one who could uncover the truth. But what she didn't know, what no one in Barra yet understood, was that the tent wasn't just a tomb. It was a message. Someone buried it there. Someone waited for it to be found. And someone was still watching. There was something unnatural about the way Barre, Vermont, aged. Other towns changed, grew, rebranded themselves. Barre remained, paused. As if the day the scouts vanished, someone hit a button marked "Hold" on the whole place. Shops closed, reopened, closed again. The same tired faces passed each other on Main Street, pretending not to remember the past. And if they did, they buried it with the same stubbornness that sealed that tent underground. But not Olivia. She couldn't forget, because for her it was never just a story. It was a scar. At exactly 6:42 a.m., Olivia Granger opened her laptop. The screen flickered once, the hard drive whirring to life like a breath held overnight. A steaming mug of black tea sat beside her, untouched. Her apartment was cluttered but lived in, walls lined with bookshelves, yellowing note cards pinned above her desk, and one wall entirely covered in photos of missing children. She didn't just write about them. She chased them, the ones who vanished, the ones who were forgotten. But none haunted her like the 7 boys from her past. She dragged a folder onto the screen titled Redfern, Personal Archive. Inside, scans of old troop rosters, scanned maps, medical records, faded photographs, time-stamped weather reports, even copies of her late mother's handwritten notes. She had built this archive over years, quietly, obsessively, because no one else would. In the bottom corner of the corkboard by her desk, taped with medical tape, was a picture of her and Caleb Rivers, both 9 years old, grinning in scout uniforms, hands muddy from building a shelter. She had loved him, or at least the childhood version of love. He was kind. He stood up for her when others didn't. And on the day before the trip, he promised to bring her a stone from the mountaintop. He never came back. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You were right." "You always were. It wasn't an accident." Her stomach tightened. There was only one person who ever signed messages that way. Aidan Blake. She hadn't spoken to Aidan in almost 5 years, not since his true crime YouTube channel began profiting from tragedies like hers. They had started together, partners in obsession, but he had sold out. Olivia stayed in the dark. He chased clicks. She chased truth. Still. She opened the text again, read it twice, then once more. She pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders and walked across the room to the one box she hadn't opened in years. It was old, dented, and marked in red Sharpie. 2005, don't. She pulled the lid off anyway. Inside were the original documents her father left her when he died. Documents he told her never to show anyone, maps of Redfern Ridge, a hand-drawn diagram of the tent placement, and a letter, unopened, still sealed. It was dated November 2nd to 2005 and addressed to her, written in her father's handwriting. She held it in her hand for several minutes, the paper crackling lightly. Her pulse echoed in her ears. She had kept it sealed for 20 years, afraid of what it might confirm. Now. Olivia, if you're reading this, then you've chosen to go further than I ever hoped. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you find the truth and make peace with it. There are things I did that cannot be undone, things I saw and didn't stop. You weren't supposed to be there that weekend, but now you're the only one who can speak for them. You must understand, what happened in those woods was never meant to happen. But someone made sure it did. Dar, her eyes welled. She had spent so many years angry at him. But now it was something else entirely, something worse, fear. Outside, Bara was waking up. Trucks rumbled through cracked streets. A bakery window glowed faintly in the fog. School buses hissed to a stop in front of sagging porches. But as Olivia stepped outside, the town felt different, like everyone knew something had shifted. She walked the long way. Past the old scout hall, now a defunct community center with boards over the windows. Past the elementary school playground where she last saw the boys waving goodbye that morning. And finally to the edge of town, where the Groton forest loomed like a memory no one wanted to speak aloud. She stood at the entrance where the trail once started. The sign was gone, replaced by tall grass and moss-covered stone, but she remembered exactly where it was. A voice startled her. "You shouldn't be here." She turned. A man in his 40s stood a few feet away, hands in his jacket pockets, face partially shadowed by his baseball cap. Aiden. Flat. He gave a weak smile. "You still read the texts? You still exploiting corpses for subscribers?" His smile disappeared. "I didn't come here to fight." "No? What did you come for?" He held out his phone. Photos, dozens. Close-ups of the tent interior before it was sealed off by the state. Someone had leaked them to him. Olivia's fingers curled. "Who gave you these?" "Same person who sent the text. I didn't send it. I just passed it along. Someone wants this out." She stared at the screen. One photo caught her eye. A close-up of a lantern in the tent. Underneath it, a notebook, half buried under sleeping bags. She zoomed in. Her heart dropped. The corner was marked with a doodle she knew, a turtle with glasses, Caleb's signature drawing. She used to tease him about it. "I need to get inside that site." Aiden glanced around. "I might know how." That night, Olivia sat in silence at her kitchen table, hands clasped around a worn cloth, her old neckerchief. She hadn't looked at it in years. Red with a gold stripe, stitched in uneven thread by her mother. Olivia, T43. She stared at it, then at the photo of Caleb. Then she took a pushpin and pinned both to her wall. Below them, in red pen, she wrote one word. "Why?" She stood back. The wall was growing again. She didn't sleep. At 2:14 a.m., she began to listen to an old cassette her father recorded as a troop leader, campfire rules, safety, a few jokes. Then at minute 28 a voice interrupts. A whisper, muffled, almost out of range. "We're not supposed to go past the... They said it was off limits. But he made us..." She rewound it 3 times. That voice wasn't her father. It wasn't any boy she remembered. It was someone else, someone older, a man. The forest didn't breathe like it used to. That was the first thing Olivia felt when she stepped beyond the old boundary line, guided by Aiden and the fading light of late October. The air was heavier, still damp, yes, but not from rain. From something older. It clung to the trees And as she moved deeper, she noticed the silence had changed. It was the presence of something. They reached the restricted area just past midnight. The police tape had already been cut. Someone had been there before them. Jesus, Aiden whispered, they're playing games. The tent had been removed, but not all of it. A large piece of the concrete slab remained, cracked down the center, with deep grooves etched into the sides like drag marks. Someone had tried to move it and stopped. Olivia dropped to her knees. The soil was disturbed, but it wasn't just dug up. It had been peeled back, like layers, as if someone wanted something buried just beneath. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out gloves. Aiden hesitated behind her. "Are you sure we should be—" "Help me," she snapped. And then, 3 inches beneath the surface, her fingers hit something hard. It was a bracelet, twine, rotted but still intact, threaded with old carved wooden beads, each bearing an initial, CRJTDMS, the 7 boys. She clutched it so hard it cut her palm. On the drive back into town, Olivia barely spoke. Aiden tried to break the silence. "You remember what happened that night?" She stared out the window. "I remember getting a fever." "Lucky." "It never felt like luck." "You think your dad knew?" Olivia didn't answer, but her grip on the bracelet tightened. Back in her apartment, she placed the bracelet beside Caleb's photo. Then she noticed something. The photo had changed. Not really, but under certain light, she saw what she hadn't before. In the far right corner, behind the troop standing near the trees, was a shadow. Faint, humanoid, face unclear. She scanned the others. Same shadow, same position. A man, watching. She scanned her wall again. Another photo, different angle, different day. Same man, standing, watching. He had been there. The next day, Olivia visited Marta Kincaid, the older sister of Jonah, one of the boys who vanished. Marta lived in a cabin on the outskirts, isolated, covered in prayer cloths and faded protest signs. "Where are our boys?" Marta opened the door like she'd been expecting her. "You saw it, didn't you?" Marta said. "Saw what?" "The red thread," Marta whispered. "It always shows up first." Olivia blinked. "What are you talking about?" Marta turned. "Come in." Inside, the cabin was lined with walls of photos, clippings, and drawings. But unlike Olivia's archive, Marta's was chaotic, feverish. Scribbles and red yarn connected names, numbers, locations. One word was written over and over. "They lied." Marta handed Olivia a tattered notebook. "I found this the day after the tent was sealed." It was her brother's. His name on the front, Jonah Kincaid. Inside, drawings, maps. But near the end, a page stood out. 7 symbols, crude, etched with a pencil so hard the paper was torn. A triangle with a slash, a circle with a dot, a line inside a box. "What are these?" Olivia whispered. "I don't know," Marta said. "But he drew them the night before they left, said a man gave them these, told them it was part of the initiation." Olivia sat in her car outside the sheriff's office for nearly 30 minutes before going in. Sheriff Delaney looked up, already annoyed. "Miss Granger, please tell me you're not here to reopen another cold case." "You already reopened it when you let that tent get buried." He stood slowly. "We never sealed that tent." "No?" she said. "Then who did?" He didn't answer, but his eyes flicked to the wall. A photo, Deputy Ethan Rudd, circa 2005. Olivia walked over and stared at it. "Where is he now?" "Retired, somewhere in upstate New York." "Tiasana. Did he ever file an official report about that weekend?" "Everything we had's in the archive." "You sure about that?" she asked. Delaney didn't respond. That night she broke into the archive room. The records were incomplete, but she found one thing, a receipt, dated October 15th, 2005. Order 7 small concrete bags, signed out by E. Rudd. She drove to upstate New York the next morning. It took 5 hours to find the old trailer. She knocked. No answer. but the door wasn't locked. Inside, dust, cobwebs, peeling walls, and in the kitchen, pinned to the fridge, a photo of Troop 43. Under it, a note. Some things should stay buried. She found the man in the back, dead from apparent suicide. On the table, a cassette recorder. She pressed play. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. They said it was a test, that the boys would panic, then be pulled out. Just fear training, you know? But then the storm hit. The concrete settled. We couldn't get them out. We tried, God help me, we tried. But someone gave the order to seal it. They said it was cleaner that way. I never agreed. I never... Click. Static. Then. And the worst part is, one of them was still alive. Olivia didn't cry. Not then. She drove straight back to Barre. Straight to the cemetery. There, in the furthest corner, were 7 gravestones, planted years ago with no bodies beneath, all lined perfectly. She sat in front of Caleb's marker. I should have been there. Behind her the wind rustled the trees. A branch snapped. She turned. Nothing. Only the stillness, only the forest breathing again. The photo haunted her, not the boys. She had grown used to their faces, young, immortalized in the final freeze frame of childhood. But the shadow, the man in the trees, he wasn't supposed to be there. She ran a digital enhancement, brightened the background, adjusted the contrast. The man wasn't blurry. He was deliberately cropped. A black marker had been used across multiple prints. Someone had tried to remove him, but missed this one. She compared it to others. 2 angles, 2 days apart, same man, same posture, always watching. She circled his figure in red and pinned the photo above her desk, and then she stared at the wall. There were names, clippings, maps, symbols, the bracelet, the cassette, the note, the red thread Marta mentioned. But now something else emerged, a pattern, the concrete slab, the missing report. Rudd's suicide, Caleb's notebook, the old cassette. She wasn't chasing a memory anymore. She was tracking a cover-up. 3 days later, a woman knocked at Olivia's door. I heard you're looking into Redfern. She looked to be in her 60s, tall, tense, clutching an old scout handbook. My name's Patricia Hale. I was a teacher back then. 4th grade. I taught 4 of the boys. Olivia let her in. Patricia sat quietly, hands never leaving the handbook. They weren't bad kids, she began. But something changed in that last month. They were jumpy, nervous, wouldn't talk. She slid the handbook across the table. Look at the back page. Olivia opened it. In pencil, faded, but legible. We have to do what they say. It's the only way we get to stay. Signed, T.J. Timothy Jacobs, one of the boys. What does that mean, Olivia? They never told me. But a week before the trip, they started staying late after meetings. Said it was advanced training. Only some were invited. Only the boys. Who ran it? Patricia looked at the door before answering. Your father. Olivia froze. No, she said. He would have told me. He was troop leader, wasn't he? Yes, but I'm not accusing, Patricia. I just want the truth, like you. Good. They trusted him, and I think they were afraid. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She walked through Bar in the dark, following instinct more than memory. Her feet brought her to the old scout hall. The windows were boarded, but the side door gave way with a shove. Inside, dust, silence, rot. But the floorboards still creaked in familiar ways. She found the basement stairs. They descended into black. She turned on her phone flashlight. At the bottom, old boxes, filing cabinets, and inside the locker, uniforms, journals, and a VHS tape labeled T43, Final Trial, Tando 13. There was only one VCR in town she knew still worked. The next morning, she brought the tape to Marta Kincaid's house. Marta had a player, and she wasn't afraid of ghosts. They watched in. The footage was grainy. Static buzzed across the screen, but the date was clear. October 13th, 2005. A fire burned in the middle of a clearing. 7 boys stood in a line, blindfolded. A man stood before them, pacing. The audio crackled. You want to be more than scouts. You want to be worthy. Then prove you can act as one, not speak, not break rank, not question. The man was shadowed, but his voice, it sounded like Harold Granger. Olivia's hand shook. She fast-forwarded. More orders, more silence. The boys sitting alone in the dark, whispering. Then the camera jolted. It dropped. A scream, then static. She rewound it, froze the frame. One of the boys had taken off his blindfold. Caleb. His face turned toward the camera, eyes wide, mouth open in shock, staring at something behind the lens, behind the man. Someone else had been there. Olivia broke down that night, not from fear, but from doubt. Her father had been her compass, even after death, even through the lies. Had he known? Had he participated? Or had he been manipulated? She didn't know anymore, but she knew where she had to go next. Groton State Archives. She requested access to the Ranger records from October 2005. The clerk was reluctant. The files were sealed. But Olivia presented a Freedom of Information letter. Reluctantly, he handed them over. One report stood out, filed October 17, 2005, by Ranger Edward Lemley. Area Redfern sealed per instruction, unmarked slab placed. Final directive came from non-state personnel. Private party present on site. Refused to identify. Used access code reserved for law enforcement. She hunted the name. Edward Lemley, now 72, lived in Montpellier. She found him in a retirement home. He barely spoke. Until she showed him the photo. The boys, the man in the trees. He stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered, "He paid us. Said it was safety training. I didn't ask more." "Who?" Olivia pressed. He looked her in the eyes. "The man with the red ring." She drove straight to Aiden's motel. "Ever heard of a red ring?" "Where did you hear that?" "A ranger," said the man in charge, "wore one." Aiden swallowed. "I have something." He opened his laptop. Pulled up an old screenshot from an online forum, one long shutdown. The thread title, Vermilion Society, Barre VT. It listed rumors of an old private moral order in Barre. A men's society founded post-war, composed of judges, business owners, churchmen. Silent meetings, secret trials, red rings. Most people think it's local legend, Aiden said. Or it was, Olivia. She looked back at the photo. The shadow in the trees zoomed again. And there, barely visible, on the man's right hand, a red circle, a ring. It started with a name, not her father's, not the boys', not the Rangers'. A name buried in an old membership ledger from the Barra Historical Society, hidden inside a forgotten filing cabinet, left behind in the abandoned basement of the old city hall. Olivia hadn't even been searching for it. She was looking for floor plans of the Scout Hall when she found the worn leather notebook with a cracked gold seal on the front. Inside, 37 names, men only, all residents of Bar, and beside each a date of initiation and a symbol, a small red stamp in the shape of a circle with a slash. At the top of the list, in faded black ink, Harold Granger, initiated 1982. Her father. She felt like the floor had tilted. The Vermilion Society was real, and her father hadn't just known about it. He'd been part of it. She barely made it home before the storm hit. The rain slammed against her windshield like stones. Thunder rumbled low and steady like a warning from beneath the earth. Inside her apartment, she spread out everything on the table. The bracelet, the tape, Caleb's drawing, the tent photos, the handbook, the red ring mention, and now, the list. Each item was screaming the same message. They weren't lost. They were chosen. But why? And by who? Aiden called her at 1:03 a.m. "I found him." "Who?" "The man in the photos." She sat up. "You're sure?" "There's an old yearbook archive online." Barre High, class of 1974. Look for page 42. She pulled it up, and there he was. Same jawline, same posture, same eyes. Only this time he had a name, Douglas Kearns. Douglas Kearns had been a district attorney in Washington County in the 90s. Resigned quietly in 2001. No scandal, no noise. Just. Olivia pulled up every article she could find. Most were bland. Legal wins, local politics, until one piece from 1994 caught her eye. D.A. Kearns sponsors local scout expansion, Redfern Initiative, to fund moral development program for advanced youths. The quote chilled her. Boys need structure. They need to know what is expected of them, and sometimes they need to be tested. She traced him to a property just outside Barre, a house tucked behind thick pine woods off a private road. She waited until morning, then drove there alone. The house was still. Old, curtains drawn. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder. A voice from inside. "It's open?" She stepped in. The air smelled of cedar and dust. The hallway was lined with bookshelves. No photographs, no warmth. Then his voice again. "Been waiting for you?" He was seated in a chair in the den, facing the window, older, thinner, but unmistakably him. "You know who I am," Olivia said. "I do." "You knew my father." "I did. You were at Redfern." "I was everywhere," he said. Then he turned. And on his right hand, glinting in the soft morning light. "I want the truth." "Yes," he exhaled, then began. "Your father believed in second chances. So did I. That's what we thought the society was. A circle of men who would make the hard decisions others couldn't. We kept the town clean. We handled problems quietly. But over time, it became something else." He paused. In 2005, there was talk of a new rite of passage for boys. Future men, strength through silence, courage through isolation, a one-night trial. He looked at her. "I didn't think it would go that far." "You buried them alive." "No," he said. "We left the site. We were supposed to return at dawn and bring them out. Fear was the test, but then—" He stopped. "Then your father called. There'd been a storm, a landslide. The pit was compromised. And you covered it up. I was told they were dead, all of them. That there was no point in dragging it into the light. It would destroy families, reputations. And was that true?" He looked at her for a long time, then said, "One of them survived." Silence. The storm outside returned in a crash of thunder. Olivia's throat tightened. "Who?" Kearns stood slowly, walked to a drawer, pulled out a file. Inside, a photo. Older, faded, a boy, maybe 11, dirty face, blank stare. His name was Simon Bell. He was the quiet one, smallest, got sick easily. Somehow he found an air pocket, clawed his way out. We found him 2 days later, wandering near the reservoir. What happened to him? He was broken. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't respond. We had a choice. Turn him over to the state or protect him. "You hid him." Nodded. "He's been under care ever since. Quiet place, outside the county. Why didn't anyone say anything of what he might remember?" Ronor. She took the file and left, without another word. She drove 6 hours without stopping. The facility was a private psychiatric clinic under a false name. She used the photo to bluff her way in. Simon Bell was now 31, but when she entered the room, she saw the same eyes. He was drawing, symbols, the same as Caleb had drawn, triangles, circles, slashes. She sat across from him. "Simon?" He didn't look up. She slid the bracelet across the table. "Do you remember this?" His hand froze. He reached out, trembled, touched it, then looked at her and whispered, "They said if we screamed, they'd bury us deeper." The silence after Simon's words wasn't peace. It was devastation. Olivia sat frozen across from him, the bracelet between them like an ancient relic. The air in the room was thick with unspoken things, pain, confusion, guilt, betrayal. Simon stared at the bracelet, his fingers twitching slightly as if each bead carried a scream, too old to be. "Simon, do you remember who told you that?" His lips trembled. Then, in a voice barely audible, "He wore a red ring. She left the clinic at dusk, and she didn't cry, not yet. Not until she pulled her car over on the side of the road, miles from anyone, and screamed into the steering wheel until her throat went raw. Then came the tears. Because there it was, laid bare. Her father wasn't just a bystander. He wasn't even just guilty by silence. He was one of them. Back in Barra, the headlines had already shifted. News of the unearthed tent had made regional papers. Nothing about the concrete, nothing about the symbols, nothing about the seventh boy who never died. The town was moving on again like it always did. Olivia wouldn't let it. She requested a formal meeting with the Barre City Council. Not as a journalist, as a daughter, as a survivor. They denied her. She showed up anyway with copies of the file, with the tape, with the list of names from the ledger. "I don't want revenge," she said, standing in front of them. "I want the truth recorded. I want you to admit that our town allowed this to happen, that it looked away while children were buried in the woods." Some shifted uncomfortably. One woman wept silently, but the mayor shook his head. "There is no proof of any organized wrongdoing." She placed a photo of Douglas Kearns on the table. "There is now." That night someone broke into her apartment. They didn't steal anything. They just tore the wall down, the photos, the strings, the timeline. And in the middle, written in red spray paint, "Stay buried." It didn't stop her. She rewired the wall, reprinted everything, rewrote the timeline. But this time, she included a new thread: the cover-up. She found Patricia Hale again, the retired teacher. Patricia had something to add. "There was a journal," she whispered. "Your father gave it to me years ago. Said if anything ever came back, to give it to you." She handed Olivia a sealed manila envelope. Inside, a small notebook, bound in brown leather, Harold Granger's handwriting. It wasn't a confession. It was a diary. "I didn't want it to happen. Not like this, but the society has its rules, and I believed in them. I believed boys needed shaping. I believed fear made them stronger. I believed I was saving them from weakness. But Caleb, when I saw his face that night, when I heard him whisper my name, I knew I'd killed something sacred. I couldn't dig them out, but I couldn't stay either." Olivia clutched the notebook to her chest. Her father had failed them, but he had suffered. That didn't make him innocent, but it made him human. She returned to Marta Kincaid. They sat together on the back porch in silence. Marta smoked. Olivia held the bracelet. "You were right," Olivia said. Marta nodded, eyes glassy. "What now?" she asked. "I tell the world." The article took her a week to finish. It wasn't a piece. It was a reckoning. The Redfern 7, the Truth Bar tried to bury. She submitted it to every major paper, most passed, until the Boston Globe called her back. They published it, and overnight, Barre wasn't quiet anymore. Families began speaking out. Anonymous letters arrived. A former Boy Scout leader admitted to seeing the boys that night, but being told to shut up or get out. The state attorney general opened a preliminary inquiry, and 1 week later, Simon Bell disappeared. The clinic said he left voluntarily, but Olivia knew better. He wouldn't leave without his drawings. She had seen them, and in his place, he left a message, scratched into the wooden table in his room, under the light. "Only one is still alive." She called Aidan. "Do you still have the footage?" "Yes, all of it. Look at the last frame, the fire reflection. Can you zoom in?" He did. And when they enhanced the contrast, they saw something they missed before, a second tent. The forest was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This time, it wasn't breathless. It was tired, the kind of silence that follows war, that settles after truth has crawled out from under 20 years of soil and shame. The wind moved differently now through the pines at Redfern Ridge, as if even the trees had finally exhaled. Olivia stood alone at the edge of the clearing. The concrete was gone. The tattered fabric of the tent removed. The site had been excavated, studied, photographed, buried again. Only a single wooden stake remained, hammered into the ground by a ranger with shaking hands. It read, Troop 43, October 14, 2005. May the truth rest where the silence once lived. She came every year now, same day, same hour. The hour the sun slipped between the trees just right and lit up the clearing like fire. It was the last thing the boys had seen. Back in Barra, things had changed. Not fast, not loudly, but they had. The article had spread, then the podcast, then the documentary. People began calling them by name again. Caleb Rivers, Jonah Kincaid, Timothy Jacobs, Darren Wood, Michael DeSoto, Trevor Hale, Simon Bell. Yes, Simon too. He was never seen again. But Olivia made sure he would never be forgotten. The Vermilion Society was officially denounced, though no member ever faced charges. Most were already dead. Some vanished quietly. One, a city councilman, wrote a letter of confession and took his life 3 months after the article broke. His last line, "We convinced ourselves it was discipline, but it was cowardice." Olivia never stopped writing. She never stopped remembering. She published a book, Buried Loud, the story of the Redfern Seven, that won awards she didn't care about. What mattered were the letters from other towns, other forests, other kids, who saw what happened in Barra and realized they weren't alone. One day, Marta Kincaid asked her, "Do you feel peace now?" Olivia looked at the wall in her apartment, where the boys' faces were still pinned, where the bracelet still hung like a thread that never broke. "But I feel truth, and that's enough." The second tent was never found. Aiden chased the lead for years. Every time they thought they were close, it vanished again, like it had never been real. But Olivia believed Simon. One is still alive. She didn't know who. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe what mattered was that someone survived, and they were out there, living, watching, healing. She placed a final item on the memorial stake that year, a folded note inside a plastic cover. It said, "You were never weak. You were never lost. They were just afraid of your voice. Now the world hears you, and it will never be quiet again." Then she walked into the forest one last time. The wind moved through the trees, not afraid, not hiding, just there. Like breath returning to lungs, like memory returning to light.